Good morning and welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Gerber here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering natural health on your Wednesday morning rise and shine. Natural health we're covering here this morning, and we're looking at the topic observe danger and take precaution. Observe danger and take precaution is what we're looking at here this morning as we do our live talk program. So top of the morning to you and welcome, and hopefully had a blessed night rest, and thanks for joining me here, stopping by with me here as we talk about some things going on in the news and some precautions that you need to take for your blessing and for the health of your family. So, welcome again. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, we thank thee again for your word. We thank you for the blessings of life and for the blessings of mind to understand and to grasp and to be able to make moves, even if it's our own personal moves or moves that we need to make in our family and in our church community. May you bless us, dear Lord, as we move forward, and may you continue to be our guide in all things for Christ's sake. Amen. So, yes, we're looking here this morning at observe danger and take precaution. It's important in life for you and I to observe the danger, whatever danger it is that we see around us, and whatever trend that we see developing that is a negative trend, that we observe these trends, we observe these developments, and we take precautions. Some of the precautions I believe in are precautions that can be had via political moves, where we encourage whatever political leaders we can encourage to make the right move for the general population and for the community. Other precautions we can take is within our church, within our community, and within our families, and for our own personal well-being, so that we don't have to suffer illness or pain unnecessarily. We don't want to be suffering pain and illness unnecessarily. That's just the point. Why die early and live a life of pain when we could avoid it? So we try to avoid this as much as possible. So I have three articles to share and a very important thought here. And the thought is taken from Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 3. For Proverbs 22 and verse 3 says, a prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. It's a very simple thought, very powerful thought though. A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. So we don't want to be simple. We don't want to be a simpleton. We don't want to be a sheeple. We don't want to just see danger and say, well, we're all going to die. Or, and just go ahead and just go get yourself mangled up. You see the danger and you say, up and I'm going to take note. I remember years back, probably about 15 years ago, I remember I would see a proliferation of Ford Explorer. I think they were like they kind of took the market and created the market to a certain degree when it comes on to these smaller SUVs. But I noticed when I would observe them driving, I always think that thing looked like it's going to turn over. It just always, I saw that. Nobody never put a thought in my mind. I would just be driving the road and one would pass me, or most of the time I would pass one. And I'd observe it and it looked like something scampering. You ever see like an animal scamper? I think that's the word. It just, that's how it looks. It looks unstable on four tires. And then later on, I remember years later, I hear news about them constantly turning over. They had a higher risk of turnover. And I always said, that's how that thing looked for me. That thing looked like if I'm driving it, I feel like I'm turning over, especially going around corners. It didn't corner well. So anyhow, I remember that, and but somebody would be like, no, the manufacturers did well, the engineers did well. You'd be like, and like somebody would say, well, how could all those engineers get it wrong? And I'm like, it looks wrong. If it looks wrong to me, it's too obvious. It shouldn't look so wrong. So that's what it is, and so you stay away. So here, a prudent man foreseeth evil and hideth himself. You see it coming, right? And the simpletons, they pass on and are punished. You're like, I don't trust that thing. So you want to be prudent, right? And so when it comes on to your health, don't worry that there's simpletons all around you. Just get that in your head. Don't worry that there's simpletons all around you, the simple people. You foresee the evil. You say, I don't think that's good. You need to go right in ahead and try to avoid it. And so, three articles here I want to share. And I'll say this here, and I'll pepper my talk about this thing in between. But a prudent person is a person that thinks and acts for the future. So, they take care about the future. And that's very difficult sometimes, especially in a world where we have this idea that, people can take up this idea that because they believe Christ is about to come, that they don't have to think and act and do things with the future in mind. So, Christ is going to about to come, so why should I worry about this or why should I worry about that? And that it could come across as the person is fervent, they're serious, and you'd miss it that the person is not fervent or serious, they're a simpleton. They're very simple in their thinking. Then they're not wise because they're not thinking about tomorrow. So it's important to not live our lives simple. We must foresee the evil, and we must say, I'm going to take caution. So somebody say, well, that could be too much. Well, what you learn is that when you take caution, you and real caution, not just you're paranoid, but real caution, not conspiracy theory caution, but just things that are out there in the open, and somebody say this might cause this, and you're like, okay, I take caution. All right, what happens when you take caution? Simply what will happen is that you will see over and over again, and I've seen this over and over again, that give it a few years as the information percolates and more people get exposed to whatever it is, that you'll see more sickness and suffering, and you'll start realizing, wow, you just ducked that bullet. You just escaped that sickness and suffering. And because you took precautions, so your precautions start to become very valuable to you. And the older you get is the more valuable those precautions. Because when you start to go to funerals of people your age, you start to say, praise the Lord, I took that precaution. But for them, they're like, oh no. They just go ahead and they think, oh, they're just being brave, but they're just being simpletons. So, very important. So, you must act and take thought and care for tomorrow. And that's where prudence comes in. You're not looking at just today. So I have three articles, as I said, and I'm going to share, if I can get to the first one. I'm going to share these three articles here, and the first one is a short hit, but just a simple precaution that I think one ought to know. Pardon me, a simple precaution that one had to be well aware of and take heed. Take heed for yourself. All right? So here we go. This is taken from Mother Jones, and this is just a few paragraphs here. And it's entitled, How Greens, Beets, and Tomato Turn Around This Historically Black Church. And is quoting the pastor that he was so frustrated with the dynamics of seeing the food that we needed and not being able to afford it. All right. So a few years ago, it says Reverend Dr. Herbert Brown III, the pastor of Baltimore historically African American Pleasant Hope Baptist Church, noticed a problem in his congregation. Many of the members were suffering from diet-related diseases. The problem is larger than just Pleasant Hope. About 30% of African Americans adults have diabetes, and an astonishing 40% experience high blood pressure. So that's a big number there. Brown knew his community needed healthier food, but fresh produce was too expensive. Quote, I had what some would call a divine content. I was so frustrated with the dynamics of seeing the food that we needed and not being able to afford it. So in 2011, he planted a vegetable garden in his church property and gave away the harvest to his congregants. Right away, churchgoers reported that they enjoyed cooking with fresh fruits and vegetables and were feeling healthier. And Brown noticed that attendance at the Sunday service improved. Initially, I thought it was because people finally were recognizing what a great preacher I am. But it had nothing to do with the preaching and more so to do with greens, beets, and tomatoes. His idea took off and evolved into the Black Church Food Security Network, a group of 14 Baltimore churches that offered discounted produce to their communities. Many grow Many grow food in their own church gardens. Some arrange farmers market through Brown's Soil to Sanctuary program, which connect black farmers with historically black churches. Right, so that's the end of that little piece there. So here's a simple idea here that to me goes back to this idea here. I say observe dangers and take precaution. As you see problems, then you say, well, we have to apply a solution to the problem. And this is what you have to do not only in your personal life, but also in the life of the community, the church, your country, whatever it is, whatever opportunity you have. You bless where you can bless, you work where you have an opportunity to work, and you take the precaution that you have an opportunity to take. Because as you know, there's so much of our health lies with our diet. Most of the diseases that we deal with are lifestyle diseases. There is still a percentage of diseases that are communicable diseases that had nothing to do with per se lifestyle. You're walking down the road and a mosquito bite you, you pick up malaria or West Nile or something like that, and it's not lifestyle. But that's a disease in the classic sense. But when we talk about so much of what we suffer and we deal with in the modern age, we're talking about lifestyle diseases. So a prudent person foreseeth the evil. If you look at it, you say, well, the diet and lifestyle of African American are such that as the number is here, I don't know if they had checked this number, but about 13% of African Americans, adults, have diabetes, and 40% experience high blood pressure. And as you know, with these numbers, they can always be higher because so many people this week, this very weekend today, are going to find out that they have diabetes. But what's going to be happening is that they're going to find out also that they had it for a while. They just never got it checked. So many people are going to find out that they have high blood pressure, but never checked it. And so they never knew it there, so they're living with it. So just think about it. And even those numbers, I know they're changing the numbers. I was reading something recently and they're trying to change the high blood pressure numbers because you could be right there on the cusp and there for a while and not knowing, hey, look, your pressure is high. You need to, on a consistent basis, you need to start doing something to bring it down before it start jumping to those critically dangerous areas that you have to be rushed to the emergency room. So when you think about that, this is where I say when it comes on to natural health, with natural health, what we're doing is we're observing dangers and we're taking precaution. We're being prudent with how we take care of our bodies and how we observe the environment around us and how we live. Because that's all it is. Today is what we have. And so today you make moves for tomorrow. Today you live for today, but part of living for today is that there is this idea that you might live to see tomorrow. And you might live to see the next 10 years if life lasts. So then if that's the case, you be prudent and you take the precautions that you need to take to avoid danger. And so some of that is simply however you're going to do to try to get some fresh fruits and vegetables in your diet, you do it. And as you do this, what will happen is that you will be basically storing up, making an investment for the future. And that's all it is. You know, you're eating for today. Yeah, your tummy is going to be filled for today. But as those nutrients build up and as the diet change, what will do, you'll be avoiding the diabetes and the high blood pressure. And as I say, especially if the numbers are against you, if you know these numbers are there in your future, then you take care of your future. And all that's going to happen, as you know, is that as you take care of the future, what will happen? You'll feel better today, but tomorrow you're starving off old age, decrepitness, weaknesses, mental fog, all these things, all these type of things, plus the lifestyle diseases, you're pushing it off. Just imagine if you can feel 10 years younger, whatever age you are at. If you're 30, you can feel 20. If you're 40, you can feel 30. That alone is worth it. And that's what I would say, that observe dangers and take precaution. And that's why, as the Bible says, a prudent person is a person that foresee a danger and take precaution. You want to do that. All right, next article I'm going to share here, and we'll illustrate the point again. And it is something that I cover probably twice so far over the years. And it is pesticide that they've been dealing with. I should say dealing with, but there's been a fight over the last few years over this pesticide. And here we go. So this is taken now from Mother Jones again, and this is quick hit again. Court finally forced the government to ban this gnarly neurotoxic pesticide. So the pesticide that is in question is chlorpyrifos. As I say, I covered it twice over the years, and it would be banned. It would have been banned in 2017 if not for Scott Pruitt, the EPA, from the EPA, Scott Pruitt's EPA. So the article now, it says, last March, former Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Scott Pruitt abruptly reversed the agency's own proposal to ban chlorpyrifos, a neurotoxic pesticide widely used by U.S. farmers. Yesterday, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals finally ordered the EPA to ban the pesticide within 60 days. Farmers use chlorpyrifos on crops ranging from corn to oranges to eradicate insects like termites and flies. But scientists and advocates have been pushing to ban it since the late 1990s. In 2000, the EPA forbade nearly all household use of the toxin. Major studies have found evidence of chemicals' risk on children's health and brain development. And as my colleague Tom Philpott report last year, shortly after the EPA reversed course on banning the chemical, more than 50 farmers were rendered ill from exposure. So I pause here because I remember I'd covered that article where 50 farm workers were rendered ill, if you remember. And most of these farm workers that were rendered ill were illegal immigrants or people working on farm workers' visas. So, and this is part of what many people don't think about. When you have a person coming in with no benefits, it is part of the risk they take that they come in and they work in these farms. And if they get exposed to some dangerous chemicals and get sick, normally they'll treat them and then send them back home. And that could be sending them back home to be disabled back in their country. So it's people coming here to do either legal or illegal work in farm industry. They're taking some serious risk because they're often exposed to some serious chemicals. This example here happened, I think it was last year I covered this. And so they've been fighting with this chemical from in the 90s to ban it because it's a neurotoxin. And if you think about this, right, just pause here again in your thinking with me here and just kind of side note but the same note. Most of these chemicals are neurotoxin. They affect the neurological system. And if you think about most of the major diseases that scare us today are primarily neurological diseases. You think about diseases like multiple sclerosis or any type of disease that affect the nervous system, so the nervous system cannot control the body and the body can't function. They are neurological diseases. And if you ask and you read about these diseases and ask any professional, they'll say, we're really not sure what's causing the diseases. We don't know what damaged the DNA. And when you keep this in mind, it's the DNA damage. And so the damage is done at a cellular level. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And so we think about that, and it's important. It affects the children's health and brain development. Think about this high rate of high rate of young kids coming up with neurological damage where their brain is not developing properly. And for the most part, what people have said is that is connected to pesticide to vaccine. And I've shown here that I think it's more than that, because we're not calculating the amount of pesticide and neurological agents that we come in contact with that damage the nervous system of the insects and have been linked to damaging the nervous system of the children. But I think also many adults are having their nervous system being damaged. So this is why I say observe danger and take precaution. The simple would just go on as if, oh, nothing happened. Give me that. Let me eat it. And not thinking what they're eating. So continue reading here. It says the latest petition filed in 2007 argued that the EPA should ban all use of the pesticide, especially in regards to agriculture. The petition was basically making the case that there is enough evidence that this chemical is harmful to children in household and rural children, farm worker children deserve the same protection. And this was Christine Schaefer, Executive Director of the Pesticide Action Network, North America, which filed a petition along with the Natural Resource Defense Council and other organizations include several farm worker advocate group. So most essentially farm workers and their children would be first in line to receive this kind of chemical. Now you think about it again, diversion here. Think about how many people will grow up with farms in foreign countries that many of the pesticides that are banned in America are not banned in those countries, and they use them freely without protection, not knowing that these pesticides are cancer-causing agents and neurological agents, and their kids also are being brought up with these neurological agents and being exposed to them. Very important to think about. So again, yes, you're doing a farming and you're bringing food to market, but the food is being exposed to some dangerous stuff. And the things that they're being exposed to, yes, it kills the bugs and the bees, but it damages the people. Now, I will also add here that notice the emphasis, which is good, is on children. But remember, pesticide concentrates in our bodies, right? So pesticide concentrate in our bodies. It does not go away, right? It gets more and more concentrated. And I believe they should be concerned about old people also. The older you get, is the more exposure to these chemicals that you're getting concentrated chloropyrifos in your body and the nerves being shot. Keep reading here. The EPA conducted a risk assessment in 2016 which determined that there was insufficient reason to doubt independent and internal scientific studies affirming the chemical's risk, putting the agency on track to ban it. But under Pruitt, the EPA delayed the plan, citing a need for additional study to be determined upon the pesticide registration review in 2022. According to Schaefer, the chemical would have not been approved upon review anyway, given that ample studies confirm its harmful effect. The court is very clear. And this is said Eric Olson, Senior Director of Health and Food at the NRDC, referring to the Ninth Circuit's latest order. Quote, the EPA has plenty of opportunity to finalize its decision. When asked to comment An EPA spokesman said the agency is reviewing the decision and that data from Columbia University remains inaccessible and has hindered the agency's ongoing process to fully evaluate the pesticide using the best available transparent science. The company behind the pesticide, Dow Chemical, reportedly gave $1 million to President Donald Trump's inaugural committee and has pushed the administration to delay its inevitable ban. In Olson's opinion, the EPA never changed its scientific view that this stuff needed to be banned. It just changed its political view that it didn't want to do anything. Based upon the language in the Ninth Circuit Court decision, all use of chlorpyrifos will be eliminated going forward, according to Olson. That extends from its use in food to its use in lawn maintenance. Think golf course. So I guess it's used a lot in golf courses. Hawaii has already banned the pesticide, and PNNA is pushing for California to follow suit as soon as possible. Rather than waiting over the 60 days for federal ban, the California Department of Pesticide Regulation has full authority to do this, wrote Schaefer in an email. And 2 state scientific bodies have affirmed within the last year that chlorpyrifos poses a threat to public health. Both the NRDC and the PNNA are keeping close watch on how the EPA will handle the exact process of eliminating the pesticide. What the EPA will be negotiating and working out theoretically in the next 60 days is whether they'll allow existing stocks to be used up, which sometimes can be negotiated. Though chlorpyrifos usage is still widespread, some farmers were already looking for alternatives. And this is from the Sacramento Bee. Quote, a lot of farmers are trying to find materials that are less harsh, less broad spectrum, and said Del Busk, prominent grower in the west side of San Joaquin Valley. In addition, Del Busk, who occasionally used chlorpyrifos on his almond trees, said many farmers are concerned that using the same chemical repeatedly will make the insects more resistant to it. End of quote. So again, here is something that is danger, right? And we must observe danger and take precaution. Notice this last person that they quoted used the products on almonds. And with almonds, most of the time we use almonds, it's it's in a shell and all that, and then you just eating the nut, but you're just eating the nut. Most of you don't even wash it, and if you washed it, I don't even know if it'll be not there because pesticides stick to oil, and so wherever there's oil, pesticide will store in fat. But the last part is intriguing to me, and it's important, which is the using of the same chemical repeatedly will make insects more resistant. Remember the principle with chemicals or drugs, that drugs never cure diseases. It just changed the form and location. And as you understand that diseases, for the most part, come from pathogens. There's lifestyle disease, where you could have a repetitive strain injury or a damage to a nerve because of repeatedly hitting it or doing something bad to it, burning it out with something. But most of the time when we talk about disease, we're talking about something where an organ is not working right, or there's a genetical damage to the DNA, or a deficiency. The body is not either processing a chemical or not have enough of that chemical or vitamin. And so we have a disease, a sickness come upon us. Okay, so keep that in mind. So when you think about this now, drugs doesn't cure the disease. So if you have a bacteria or a virus, the drug will hit it and put it probably in dormancy. So the person will think, oh, I got over the bacteria, or I got rid of the virus. But what the virus do, it goes into like a cocoon state, a protective state. It goes dormant. It learns because it's intelligent. Unlike what scientists say because they believe in evolution, it is intelligent. That little thing there, microscopic thing, learns the chemical and develop a protection similar to what our immune system does against the chemical, and then it comes back as a what we'll call a chemical resistant. It develops resistant, and it becomes immune to the chemical. But that immunity to the chemical and the process it just went through make it even more dangerous. So then it changes its form, and then it changes location, and it hits us somewhere else. And now we have a worse disease. And this is why, if you notice in our society, more and more people are picking up some type of bacteria, and they're getting amputations, or they're being killed. There's a recent story you can search online. I think it came out last week, where two people in one of the Midwest states, I think it was Minnesota or somewhere over there, they ended up getting one lady. She was 56. She got nipped by a dog, one of her dogs, and there's a bacteria in the saliva of the dog that doesn't affect dogs, but it's dangerous to us. It got into her skin, and they end up trying to do all kind of surgery and stuff to save her, and she died. At the same time, another person in the same state in a different situation was around some dogs. He didn't know how the dog saliva got into him, but they ended up having to cut off both hands and feet, or his foot. I don't know at what point they cut it off to save him, because the bacteria start to overrun his system. And they saved him, but they said when they did the blood test, they found that the same bacteria that he had in his system was in the dogs. So these things are there, but what it is now, I really believe is happening, is not just the insects become resist. The insects are not affected anymore by these broad spectrum or these different chemicals. The bacteria and the viruses are being affected because these chemicals are used so much. So, when they're talking about, hey, let's cut back the amount of penicillin, whatever they call it, antibiotics. When they say, let's cut back the amount of antibiotics being given to human beings, I think the broader discussion is like, we need to cut back the chemicals, period. Because the dogs are being exposed to the chemicals. The cats. The lady has cats also. The insects. And so after a while, it's like the insects die. They die. And then there's like, we ain't dying anymore. We figure this out. And they stop dying. And the chemicals become useless, but the insects become weird. Because they become now some Franken insects. And it becomes something like out of a horror movie. And now these insects now are dangerous. The ticks are dangerous. Everything is dangerous nowadays. Everything is like out of some weird movie. And some people say, oh no, this is lab created. I don't believe it's lab created. I believe it's this, this constant use of chemicals, and the plants and the insects and the animals are being messed up by it, but in turn they're killing us off. Look into that. You find that fascinating. I find that fascinating because they say, I'll read the last part. It says, the farmers are concerned that using the same chemical repeatedly will make the insects more resistant to it. This is happening to Roundup. Roundup is one of those broad spectrum pesticide that is genetically engineered, or the what you call it, the soybean is genetically engineered, and the use of it is causing problems. So that's why it's important for you to observe danger. So the question is, what is the danger? The danger is do whatever you can to pay a little bit more to eat as natural and organic as possible, because what you're doing, you're avoiding your exposure to all these chemicals that are cancer causing, and also that are neurological. They damage the neurological system. As you do this, what will happen is that you're starving off your suffering and your pain, your confusion, your degeneracy, your disability. You're putting it off. You put it further down the road. Why suffer things that you don't have to today when you can avoid it? And that's basically the idea. So that's why now when I read the text, and the text says, a prudent man foreseeth evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. It's important for you to see these things and understand that it's worse than what they're telling us. Because, as I'm saying, even the regular farmers now are observing that the chemicals are not affecting the bugs as they used to. And the bugs are getting weirder and more vicious. And people are dead, as I say. Go check out that news with these two individuals, same state, exposed to this bacteria in the saliva of the dog. One of them dead. And and the other thing they say, normally this bacteria could kill you if you have a compromised immune system, but none of these people, the two individuals that one and all the amputation, the other one died, none of them it was known of them to have a compromised immune system. So just think about that, right? So that tells you, if that is true, that holds true, then we have a problem on our hand. So that's why when you see this, you take caution, you become prudent, you understand, don't expose yourself to all these chemicals, because you might be damaging your neurological system, damaging your immune system, and it might seem like you're not having a compromised immune system, but it might be well compromised. You just don't know. So you want to take that caution and do what you have to do. So I'm going to go to my third article here. Let's see if I can get through this as I continue here talking about observe danger and take precaution. So here's another danger that one has to be aware of. And this is now taken from NBCnews.com and is written by Maggie Fox. And this is yesterday. FDA recalls are a reminder that China controls much of the world's drug supply. So there's a recall that happened, and it tells you that China is making most of the drugs. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, has brought in a recall of common blood pressure drug valsartan, saying some batches have been contaminated with a potentially cancer-causing chemical. While no product sold in the U.S. has been found to be contaminated, the FDA says that the process used in making some generic versions of valsartan has the potential to generate a cancer-causing chemical called NDMA. Some batches sold in other countries were contaminated, says Dr. Janet Woodcock, director of the FDA Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. These are present at very minute levels, but because they are toxic to the DNA, you have to control them. The FDA has told patients to keep taking their drugs until they can be sure that they're either using an unaffected brand, or that they can be switched to a safer one. The threat is not immediate, Woodstock said. It is a lifetime exposure to this that is dangerous. It's not like it would give you cancer tomorrow. All right, I'm pausing there in my thinking because I read this before, but I'm still thinking through the process here. So I'll just pause here a little bit. Let me say this here. Notice it says it is the lifetime exposure. Most naturally, this is true. The body does accumulate over the years chemicals in the system, and there's a way where the body will expel some of it, but as you go on in life, you build up. So that's true. These chemicals don't just exit the system immediately. And she's basically saying a small dosage of this cancer causing product that damages the DNA. So it make you start unravel at your core, which is fascinating stuff. Is You would have to be exposed to this cancer causing product and just basically destroy you long term. So this is why I say that observe dangers and take precaution. And a prudent person foresees the danger. The prudent is looking down the road. It's an investment for the future. But you know, and I know, which is my thought now, that when a person is taking a drug that is designed to help them with like high blood pressure and stuff like that, that high blood pressure drug is taken long term. It's not something that people normally take, for a month or two, and then they stop. Most people, when they're taking high blood pressure drugs, they start and 10 years later they're taking it. So you do get exposed to a chemical. You have to know what chemical you're taking and what is the side effects and what are your alternatives and what are your lifestyle changes that you can make. Because a person sitting there taking high blood pressure medication, they're going to be, if they start it now, unless they're making some serious diet and lifestyle changes, 10 years from now, you can almost guarantee they'll be taking the same chemical. And imagine you're taking that same chemical day in, day out. Now, we know the article is about another chemical that was introduced in the manufacturing process that is cancer causing. But it's also important to note that this is the type of process that's going on. But the chemical itself that you're taking, you need to know what it does to the body and what it does to the body short term and long term. Look at the adverse side effect and look at the normal side effect. And you pay attention especially to the ones that they say rarely happen. Because if you'll be taking the drugs for 3 years, count on it that the ones that rarely happen, you will be experiencing it. So continue back to the article here. The FDA has told patients to keep taking the drugs until whatever, verse whatever. But the case does illustrate the challenges that the FDA must overcome in regulating a drug market that's increasingly outsourced to other countries, especially China. While Woodcock says that the FDA is on top of things, other experts say these cases illustrate just how vulnerable the U.S. is when it depends on other countries to make essential drugs. China doesn't have anything like the consumer protection laws and product liability laws like the United States does, says Rosemary Gibson, a healthcare expert at the Hastings Center, who wrote the book titled China RX, Exposing the Risk of America's Dependence on China for Medicine. Chinese manufacturer was the source of contaminated heparin, a commonly used blood thinner that killed at least 81 people in 2007 and 2008. And FDA inspection showed that the Chinese factory where the contaminated products were made had serious deficiencies in what's known as good manufacturing practices. Woodcock said that the FDA has other ways to ensure product safety. It regularly sends inspectors to scrutinize Chinese facilities. For instance, we have the exact same standards for drugs marketed in the US regardless of where they're made. But no inspection would have found the NDMA contaminant, which is a byproduct of processing foods such as bacon and is a water contaminant as well. Woodcock noted it's not to be discovered using a specific chemical test designed to find particular compound. We are planning to test all the valsartan products in the United States for this impurity. Woodcock said the FDA has issued new guidance to all makers of drug ingredients to make sure that NDMA, and other potential cancer-causing chemicals that can be made as part of the manufacturing process stay out of any finished product. Still, Woodcock said it's a big job. So before I keep reading here, so notice here the MDMA, which is a cancer-causing chemical, is a byproduct of processing foods such as bacon and is a water contaminant as well. So you're processing bacon, and one of the byproduct, the waste that comes out of processing bacon, is a cancer-causing product. As they say, you can't make that stuff up. This is some crazy stuff. The field is stretched. So she said FDA inspectors must keep an eye on U.S. makers of pharmaceutical, including large and small outfits that make specialty compound drugs. But we do what we can. We get to the highest risk places every year, she said. Outside experts point out that the FDA cannot control the manufacturers in other countries and say no amount of FDA inspection can ensure a reliable supply of vital medical products. It's a major national security risk for us in two ways, says Mike Osterholm, director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota, an expert at biosecurity. We are very concerned about the quality of these drugs. And the Trump administration has been engaged in months of verbal and bureaucratic battle with China over tariffs. Quote, now we are caught in an economic war in the sense of tariffs, says Osterholm, added in an interview. If we were ever in an international incident with China, they would literally have their hands around our necks in terms of critical drugs. They wouldn't even have to fire a shot. What they would say, just cut the production? I don't know where he's getting at. Is he saying they would cut the production, or they would just start poisoning the drugs? Gives the estimate in her book that 80% of the ingredients in U.S. branded pharmaceuticals and over-the-counter drugs start out in either China or India. That I believe. Food has been used as a weapon of war. Our medicine can be used like that too, she said. China made a strategic decision to develop its pharmaceutical industry and has succeeded, Gibson says, undercutting price and grabbing market share from other countries. Penicillin is a good example, she said. We don't make penicillin ingredients in this country anymore. That happens because China companies came in and dumped it on the global market at a very low price. Now they are the largest producer of penicillin industrial ingredient in the world, in the whole world. The U.S. market is vulnerable to products that are contaminated, but is even more vulnerable if some kind of accident, problem, or disaster shut down factories, Gibson says. Imagine if a major earthquake hit or a civil war broke out in some of the major pharmaceutical producing cities, Gibson said. It would be disastrous. India still produces some of the drugs for us, but most of the essential compounds for them come from China. So they would shut down too. Osterholm points to the damage done in Puerto Rico after the Hurricane Maria last year. Medical supplier Baxter makes a large percentage of saline solution in Puerto Rico. And the 2017 hurricane shut down the manufacturing for months, worsening an ongoing shortage of saline intravenous drip bags. So that's something that literally happened. Remember that. And so here, important, notice here again, this is a simply, they're saying, which makes sense. If most of the chemicals, most of the compounds, most of the baseline ingredients that makes the drugs are coming out of China and India, anything that happened there would be affect America. And although the drug that is in question that's being discussed is contaminated with this thing that can be a byproduct of producing pork or bacon, the NDMA that came from the contact that has been contaminated, that has contaminated valsartan. Here you have this problem here that the person could be taking a drug and not knowing, that it's not just the clothes or the tchotchkes or the various different technology is coming from China, but even the drugs is coming from China, or the raw material to make the drugs, as the article stated here that 80% of all the drugs or raw material comes from China and India, which is huge. That's a shift that happened that until reading this article I never even knew took place. I never knew that most of the medicines, although they're probably owned by American companies, the raw material and the generic brands are coming out of China. So you just think you go to the average person now and say to them that 80% of the drugs you take is either the raw material or the end product is coming out of China or India. That's phenomenal. That's some serious numbers there. So Gibson estimated in her book that 80% of the ingredients in U.S. brand pharmaceuticals and over-the-counter drugs start out in either China or India. I want to just read it again so I can say it exactly the way it was said in the article. So this is why it's important, as I say, to observe dangers and take precaution. Because as you know, between China and India, when it comes on to food or when it comes on to chemicals and stuff, you need some like third-party DNA testing. You need third-party testing because the focal point is just cash, cash, cash. And there's certain baseline governmental organization were never put in place to deal with chemicals, to deal with contamination, to deal with stuff. And as the article stated, I'm just stating what the article stated. And I've never heard anything like this out of China or India. It seemed like it's just basically they're experiencing the robber baron state that America was in over 100 years ago, where just make money, destroy the environment, just do whatever you can to make and just destroy as long as you make money. Capitalism gone mad. So this is what they're going through. And as they're going through this, what it is now, just imagine if, again, most of the American public find on that. This is where it's not just their dangerous cell phones is coming from there, toxic cell phones are coming from there, but now 80% of all the stuff that you take, it's the source started or finished there, and then you take it. And then these type of contamination are happening that they constantly have to send. They said they send the inspector to the most troubled spots. But again, as you know, a lot of time people know to operate on the radar and seem very upfront and good. So what am I saying here? You need to observe the danger and know that you need to, just like the farmers and just like in this situation, you need to be always finding the most natural, the most healthy alternatives. You need to be taking care of your body as much as humanly possible. You need to not say, well, I pray about it and leave the rest up to God. It's a certain point you need to say that, but there's a certain point where you need to take caution and don't be simple and find out what are the risks that are involved and known risk. Because it's one thing for you to suffer and you don't know, so you're just suffering and things bad happening to you, but you really don't know, and there's no available data to expose or show you what to do. But it's another thing when you're suffering and there's available information to guide you as to what you need to take caution and what you need to avoid. So you take the caution that you need to take because you understand we're dealing with serious, you know, children and adults are dealing with serious allergy problems, asthma problems, cancer problems, neurological brain development problems. I think they're making even a mistake because every year they keep realizing that the mental problems that are in our society is worse because most of the time they're worried about the children, which is good, but they're not looking and say, well, wait a minute now. There's adults that their brains seem to be permanently foggy. It is not turning over. I'm not talking about people in the 70s. I'm talking about people in the 40s and 50s and so. Is that the brain is fried. And I really believe is that is all that NDMA from the pig that they're eating, and the brain is literally fried, you know? And so it's important for you and I to know that and know that a lot of the things that people are suffering are neurological damage from some of these dangerous chemicals, and that we need to take the caution to eat as natural as possible, to cleanse our body, to take care of our health, and to take the precaution. Even though somebody might say, well, why are you making so much effort? Because, I don't want to live with a fried brain. If I can avoid it, I'm going to avoid it. I'm not going to, I don't want to leave no high blood pressure medication. So if you can avoid it, just avoid it. Just do the things that you need to do, and God will bless you. So I read again our text, and I'll close on these thoughts here. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 3 says, a prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. The simple pass on or punished. It might take you some more effort. It's like the choice between slow food and fast food. Fast food is fast, it's produced fast, and it's a mess. Slow food, you need to take more time. But what are you doing that you can't take more time to take care of your food? You just need to readjust your mind. It's like a slow child and a fast child. A child 14 and she's fast, or he's fast, and a child 14 and he or she is slow. The fast children, they're gonna always get messed up young. The slow child, they're gonna always be blessed. It doesn't matter in life, the principles are always the same. You take the precaution, you take the extra time, you source your food properly, you read your ingredients, you spend that extra 50 cents, spend the extra $1 per pound, get that as natural as possible. You get that tree ripened stuff, make it stay on the tree, let it ripe. Stop eating all that young, sick stuff. And you make that extra precaution. That other person, they're simple, they'll be like, I don't see what's the big deal. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about them. They're simple. Simple people are just going to always get punished for the simplicity. But you don't need to get punished for your simplicity. So you need to see the danger, and you need to allow the simpleton to blindly go on in bliss, la 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 la, and then get crushed, and you hear them screaming, and you're like, why are you screaming over there? Oh, I'm being beaten up. I've been eaten alive by this, thing mulching me up and chewing me up and spitting me out. And that's life. But you don't need to go on in life. And that's what the Bible is very careful of. There's many people that's going to suffer accidental deaths. You don't need to do that. There's many people that cannot understand that leukemia is primarily sourced from chicken. And yet you see a person saying, oh, I'm coming down with bone cancer or bone marrow cancer. And then you say, wait a minute, didn't I see you a few years ago chewing that chicken bone and sucking all the bone marrow out of the chicken bone? But when you're in ignorance, you don't think about it. You just like, but chewing that chicken bone and eating that bone marrow. And, you get that soup with that soup bone. And you suck all that bone marrow out of the soup bone. And not thinking, wait a minute, what's in the soup bone? The production. That's the production part of the body. It's in the bone marrow. And in the garbage, that's where it's going to be produced and replicated by the DNA and so forth and so on. So the person is there chewing on that thing, and what they're doing, they're eating their leukemia. And so it's important. So you see that, you learn, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to take the precaution. And when you get the benefit and you see other people falling apart physically, you see their skin, their brain, they can't talk properly, they can't think properly, they're physically just falling apart. You're like, yeah, that's what the Bible says. The prudent take caution. The simpleton goes on blindly, and they suffer the consequence. You don't want to suffer the consequence, so you make that precaution. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, again for the blessings of your word and the blessings, dear Lord, of knowing thee, the only true God. I pray, the Lord, that we might be careful in this life and not go along silly, not believe in your word. May you bless us, dear Lord, knowing that men's hearts are evil and careless, and that we should be careful. Be with us, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. Thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you again live tomorrow morning, where we shall do our current events. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.